How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask me anything that you like about politics, and I will do my best to give you a great answer, a subjective answer, sorry, an objective answer, a sincere answer that is accurate and, completely absent of any sort of spin or bias. It is a place for not fighting. It is a place for good faith engagement on politics. I am just here to answer all of your questions about politics, and there's no judgments, there's no roasting, there's no debating. It is just good faith answers to all good faith questions. I know politics can be really confusing these days. There's a lot of weird misinformation and propaganda out there, and so that's what we're doing here, guys. This is a place where you can ask all the questions about what's actually going on, what's real, what's fake. It is yeah, it's a weird time to be an American citizen with governments doing bananas things, and the news media seems to be not up to the task of covering it or really sounding the alarms in a way that is appropriate. And so that is what this show is for, so that you can ask all of your questions and you don't have to worry about getting roasted or debated or made fun of for not knowing things. I don't believe in making fun of people for not knowing things or trying to learn new things. There's no such thing as a dumb question. So if you got any questions about politics, just put them in the chat and I will do my best to give you a good answer. As objective as I can possibly make it, as sincere as I can possibly make it. This is not a fighty show. This is not a show for debates or owning people or destroying people or slamming people and calling each other names. I don't care if you are a Democrat or a Republican or something else that is outside of that spectrum. I'm not going to yell at you for your political beliefs. Isaac says thoughts on socialism. It is one of many good systems. We currently already have a little bit of socialism here in America. The post office, the military, public schools, the fire department. Socialism is basically just we all pour our money into a pot, and then the government spends that money in a way that is hopefully beneficial for everybody in America. I think we have a little bit too much capitalism in this country, and so maybe we can balance that out with a little bit more socialism and a little bit more communism. Like maybe we could have socialized medicine. Maybe we could have tax incentives for companies being employee owned. That sounds pretty good to me. Ron Banales says, tell me a Democrat policy resolution or something that will make life better for, I'm guessing you, Ron? The Democratic Party is trying to switch us over to a renewable energy grid, which would mean less pollution going into your lungs and in your water and into your food. The Democratic Party believes in common sense gun control legislation, which means fewer school shootings. So maybe you have kids that are going to school, you wouldn't have to worry so much about them getting shot at school. The Democratic Party believes in decreasing income inequality. So you will probably get paid more, you will get more benefits at your job, stuff like that. Oh, right. Romeo Vaccarella says views on the Second Amendment. I don't think we need a Second Amendment. There are other countries without one that they seem to be doing great. Guns are a real big problem in this country, and I think that is associated with a uh, I don't know, a reticence of our politicians to led to regulate them in any way, because some people view any regulation of guns to be an infringement on their Second Amendment rights. But something needs to be done. Our kids are getting shot at school. Oh, okay. Lemmy Gardenmeister, good to see you again. Says, to me, socialism is the workers' only means of production. I think that's communism, actually. Government programs are just sane policies, I think, the way that you were ending that. Yeah, no, I think that there is a substantive difference between the word socialist and communist, and I'm pretty sure that communism is workers' only means of production, aka employee-owned companies. And socialism is, socialized medicine, for example. We all give the government our tax dollars, and then the government pays for us to have healthcare in exchange. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom of the TikTok comments, Tyga says, do you think the Democrats are weak and feckless in Congress? I do not, but I understand why people have that idea, because a lot of billionaire money has gone into creating propaganda that creates the idea that the Democratic Party is weak and feckless. Donnie says, that's not the definition of socialism. Okay, according to you. Jimmy88 says, why do we vote for old people? I mean, you should ask somebody who has voted for old people, because I generally vote in the primary for more, young and progressive candidates. Sometimes my candidate doesn't win the primary though, so I still have to vote for whoever the person was that won the primary. Okay, scrolling down to the bottom, Donnie says there is no definition for socialism, it's just state control. That is also not true, Donnie. Ejal says, so what is the status on the shutdown? It appears that I think the last thing that I heard was that the Republican Party put forward a 1 year extension for the Affordable Care Act subsidies, and I believe that Hakeem Jeffries rejected that. I think they're holding out for permanent subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. So yeah, Republican Party still doesn't give a shit about people not being able to work or get paid. They don't care about airline delays. Bobby B says, "Do you think there should be an age limit for voting?" There is. You can't vote if you are younger than 18. Ejal already did that one. Laura says Republicans should be ashamed. I completely agree with that. Let's see here. Tyga. Bobby B says, how close are we to authoritarianism? I'd say we're probably like 65, 75% authoritarian right now. Donnie says it's useless to get paid more when the government keeps spending the dollar into decline. That is not the reason why the dollar is declining, Donnie. It seems like you're here to spread a lot of misinformation, Donnie. So I would just encourage you to ask a question instead of saying things that are not true. Electric Barbie says, I'm not MAGA, but genuinely curious, are we headed into World War III? I think it is unlikely that there's going to be another world war. I think that the Trump administration and Trump himself are so stupid and bad at diplomacy. They are allowing corruption and their own laziness and incompetence to lead global policy, which means that there are going to continue to be incursions and wars and instability between nations, but I don't think that that is going to escalate into a world war. I could be wrong about that. That's sort of like my optimistic view of things. I think the main concern right now is that America seems to be stoking a war with Venezuela, which would be absolutely psychotic and insane. Kat says, just saw Ken Martin with Jon Stewart. DNC has zero direction. I disagree with that. I think the DNC has a direction. Cyrock Obama says, I think we're already in World War III. In my opinion, just looks a little different. Well, that's a more pessimistic way of looking at things, I guess. Stephen Harding says, that's a ridiculous comment. What is? Hawaiian Bear says, I was just about to ask you about Venezuela. I mean, it is wildly concerning. On the most recent episode of Pod Save the World, the very first thing they talk about is Venezuela and what the possible motivations are for Trump trying to start a war with Venezuela and why it's a really bad idea. I can try to summarize it as best I can if anybody is interested, but if you want to get a better read on it from people that actually used to work in the government and who are experts in foreign policy, I would check that out. Hawaiian Bear says, are they trying to get ahead of China? I mean, if they are, they're failing wildly. They're doing the opposite of what they would need to do to get ahead of China. Let's see here. Danny says USA can't go to war because we broke. Let's see here. Are you the same Danny that was spreading misinformation before? No, that was Donnie. Sorry. Lenny Gardemeister says, what do you think about companies like King Arthur Flour where the workers run it democratically? I think that is the way that every company should work. I have not heard an argument for why every company should not be employee owned the way that King Arthur Flour or Bob's Red Mill or Publix grocery stores is. Speedy Gonzalez says, can I ask you a question? Yes, you can. Put it in the chat. Bobby B says, do you think we are only going to war with Venezuela for money? I think there's a bunch of motivations there. Like Marco Rubio, for example, apparently for his entire time in government, he has been obsessed with ushering in regime change for Cuba and Venezuela specifically for some fucking reason. The dude is, he's got a real problems, with his noodle. So I really couldn't tell you what his whole fucking deal is about that. But he's not a very smart legislator or person. He's completely bent the knee to Donald Trump after appearing to have like a tiny bit of credibility in his first term. Stephen Miller likes the power that he thinks his administration would get if we were in an active war with another country, particularly one that calls itself socialist, even though it's not socialist. And Donald Trump has a bunch of buddies in the fossil fuel industry who really want to get the oil that is in Venezuela. And so, it's also a useful scapegoat because they claim that they're bringing drugs to America, which is just like they send so little drugs to America. There are other countries that do it way more. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's authoritarian. It's lying. It's all the same shit. Oh, let's see here. Jamal, for gay thoughts, says Rubio is super anti-communist Cuban exile. All right. Well, in that case, I think that he is wrong. Let's see here. Hawaiian Bear says, "What is your opinion on mass deportation?" It's dumb. It's damaging. It's barbaric. There's no way to do it in a way that isn't massively disruptive to communities and businesses and families. The way that ICE and the Trump administration are doing it is like extra barbaric. It's like some Holocaust concentration camp shit. It's just dumb because immigrants are a net positive in this country. If there are issues with, people sneaking across your yard to get across the border and that's really freaking you out, like we should 100% address that. If there are specific areas of the country that are currently being overwhelmed by immigrants who need specific government services, that can be addressed as well. But on the whole, on the average, adjusting for time, immigrants are a net positive both economically and culturally. So it's like, why are we doing this? It's not solving any problem. The problem that people think mass deportation is going to solve are were actually caused by billionaires hoarding all of the resources. And so, those problems aren't going to go away when we do mass deportation. They're only going to get worse. And then billionaires are going to still they're going to try to find another scapegoat to put on that. King Desert Loner says, "What do you think of the Housing Supply Frameworks Act? Is that the California bill that is trying to get more housing built, or is that something else?" King Deserter is Desert Loner. King Desert Loner. JEPZ says, "When is the soonest the government could be reopened?" Immediately today. It could. Let's see here. Speeding Zealot says, "Should Trump send the National Guard to Chicago? It's for a debate class. Trump should not send the National Guard to Chicago. He doesn't have the authority. He doesn't have any good reason to. The local government of Illinois and Chicago do not want them there. The citizens do not want them there. This is the reason why he wants to send them there is so that he can be an authoritarian, so that he can usher in a military coup, and so that he can hurt blue states and cities. The reasons that he is giving are lies and bullshit." YM Bear says, "Did the governor and the mayor follow lawsuit to stop him in Chicago?" They did. We're still waiting to find out how that is, and I don't really trust the current Supreme Court to rule fairly on that, but we'll just have to see. Jack, good to see you again. What are your thoughts on squatters' rights? Generally speaking, I prefer to have laws that protect people, renters, and make life harder for the people who own properties like landlords and giant corporations. Are there people that have abused squatters' rights? Absolutely 100%. Still, I think I would rather have them being able to use that against malicious landlords. I think that'll probably be a net positive. Fletch Lives Again says, "Thoughts on Pam Bondi talking to Congress? I thought it was bananas." I mean, she basically just had like a list of insults that she wanted to give to Democrats, and then she was there and she was able to do it. I think Adam Schiff did a really good job of outlining all the questions that she refused to answer while she was there. But this is what the current Trump administration is doing. They're going to these congressional hearings. They are lying. They're being abusive to Democrats. They're being argumentative and obfuscating the truth because they learned from the first Trump administration that treating those hearings as if they have any kind of teeth is what Trump does not like. And if you and he will protect you from any kind of legal consequences for lying or not answering questions. Yeah, it's just a terrible look. The hardcore MAGA base is going to love it, obviously, because they think they're speaking truth to this Democratic deep state conspiracy that's happening. But in reality, it's just fucking embarrassing and it is not legal. Beaverino says, "Thoughts on the Saudi Arabian comedy show?" For a long time, as a stand-up comedian, I have seen and been worried about the lionizing that comedians have been getting as the truth tellers and the modern day philosophers and stuff like that. All I have seen are a bunch of comedians who are abusing that title. The Joe Roganses, the Andrew Schultzes, the Theo Vonses. Like they're abusing this idea that they have immunity from any kind of criticism because all they're doing is expanding the boundaries of our public square, free market of ideas kind of a thing. When in reality, what we are talking about are a group of people who have been, shall we say, corrupted by power and money. And so we have a lot of people who have gotten used to their cushy lifestyles and don't mind infringing upon their own morality to help the Saudi royal family, spit wash their reputation. It's disgusting. I'm very pleased with every comedian that stood up for themselves and stood up for their morals and rejected that. Bobby B says, "Do you think Trump administration will end up in jail if their plan doesn't work?" I mean, it's a difficult question because you have a couple of things working against that. Number one, there is the sort of civility police wing of the Democratic Party that believes that we need to be as respectable to the opposition as possible, even if they are doing things that are wildly illegal and barbaric. And then there's the ones that are worried that even legitimate consequences for real laws that have been broken by this administration will look like partisanship and lawfare, even if it is completely justified. We saw this during the Biden administration, where that was completely on the up and up. If any criticism could be lobbied at Merrick Garland, it's that he was kind of pussyfooting around it and being a little bit too cautious and slow rolling it. And yet still the narrative that was coming out of the right and a lot of people believed because of misinformation and propaganda was that that was lawfare and that the Democrats were going after Trump because he was their political opposition. There is the possibility that because people in the Trump administration and Trump himself are extremely wealthy, that they will be able to use their money to delay or use some sort of loophole to get out of any kind of consequences. So, I desperately want there to be some consequences for this group of people that are so flagrantly breaking the law, ignoring the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks for all these gifts, guys. I really appreciate it. Um, and the only way that that is going to happen is if people like you and I do the work of actually electing more responsible people into the government, like the Democratic Party, for example. But even if that is the case, we are still going to have to do a lot of work to make sure that that happens because there are very powerful people who are going to try to stop them from having any kind of consequences. Okay, King Desert Loner says, nope, Delaware sponsored bill by Lisa Blunt, Rochester bill to create guidelines for state and local governments to framework zoning laws. Unfortunately, I am not aware of all statewide legislation, King Desert Loner, so I can't opine on that for you. DJ Sir Lancelot says politicians are shills. I would encourage you, DJ, to not make blanket statements like that. There are good politicians and there are bad politicians. And when you lump them all together like that, you are giving cover for the worst ones. Saint Monkey says, do you think it's inevitable that the list will be released once the new blocked member gets in? I saw some reporting today that suggested that it was. I am concerned about what Kash Patel and the FBI have been able to accomplish as far as doctoring those documents and pieces of evidence in this period of time. Kash Patel has proven himself to be completely without any, foundational beliefs or ethos. He will just do whatever Trump wants him to do. There is reporting to suggest that he has redirected like over 1,000 FBI agents to redacting names from the fellow with the island information. There was that one story about a dude who got honey trapped by a reporter and confessed on tape that the FBI was blocking out Republican names from those files and inserting or highlighting Democratic names. So it's concern. I would love for that information to come out, but unfortunately, anything that sits in this Department of Justice for long enough can't really be trusted. The only thing that I would trust coming out of the current FBI is something that is negative about Trump or Republicans, because that is just information they would not have been able to hide yet. Alrighty, let's see here. TikTok motherfucker says, what are your thoughts on California Prop 52 redistrict early? I think that Prop 50 is the most perfect piece of reactionary gerrymandering piece of legislation that could possibly exist. It literally only goes into effect if Texas does it. So again, it is just undoing the damage that the Texas redistricting is doing. It undoes itself. It cancels itself if the Texas redistricting gets undone for some reason. The Democratic Party, which is the party that is, marginally responsible for this bill, tried to make this kind of partisan gerrymandering illegal in the past, and the Republicans filibustered it. It is literally just their Democratic Party refusing to get walked all over. It is the Democratic Party standing up and saying, we are not feckless, we are not weak, we are going to stand up, and we are not going to let Texas and Republicans try to steal House elections going forward. It is the right thing to do. And until we can get a Democratic majority in the federal government that can make partisan gerrymandering illegal, it is incumbent upon every blue state to try their best to undo the damage that red states are doing in their partisan gerrymandering. Brass Monkey says, do you just say anything your husband tells you to? That is so weird because your mom does whatever I tell her to do. Let's see here. Jack says, a few years back during the BLM movement in its prime, were you also for defunding the police? So defunding the police is a slogan that came out of activists. It was not focus grouped. It was not, discussed with the Democratic Party in general. It was a group of people that were tired, justifiably outraged at abuses of power that we all saw police in every state not only perpetrating but getting away with. And so defund the police was the expression that came out of that. But what that means, like its nuts and bolts, is the police are massive and they are getting told to go do things that they are not trained to go do. For example, if somebody's having a psychotic break out on the middle of the street, these are not people that are trained in dealing with people that are having psychotic episodes. And so the defund the police movement is saying, let us perhaps split the funding of the police into two so that we can create separate agencies, an agency that deals with like public safety and welfare, and then we can use the police for things that the police are actually trained for, like going after gangs and violent criminals and murderers and sexual, criminals and, stuff like that. But yeah, this idea that the defund the police movement means that there should be no police at all is like reactionary right wing propaganda. Alex says, was the 2018 Farm Bill beneficial? I don't know too much about it, Alec. If I'm remembering correctly, it was basically just a bailout for farmers because Trump's policies started a trade war that made it so that farmers weren't being able to sell all their produce and that their farms were in danger of going bankrupt. And the exact same fucking thing is happening right now. It's sort of like a band-aid for a broken leg. Like, you're not going to fix the substantive problem by just giving those farmers a bailout. What you need to do is not do stupid trade policy where you start a trade war, America versus the entire globe. Scott Clower says many police forces have become militarized. Yeah, that is another part of the defund the police argument, is that police departments should not have the same gear that the military had during like Desert Storm and shit like that. All right, Social Rose says, how do you feel about Republicans not bringing Democrats to the table regarding keeping the subsidies? They're playing hardball. This is what Republicans do. They are the party of never give an inch, push the Overton window, no compromise, compromises weakness, that sort of thing. And so I think that it is incumbent upon the Democrats in power to meet that force with equal force and be like, you're not going to push us around. We are going to do everything that we can to protect American citizens' ability to get affordable health care. Brandy Ween says, want to see barbaric deportation? Look up, I don't know who that is. Diego Vargas says, how could farmers be so dumb and vote for Trump after he said he would do tariffs? Diego, I would encourage you not to call other voters dumb, even if you feel like they are doing things that are not wise for their own self-interests. These are people just like you and me, and potentially if we grew up in that community, going to that church, looking at that Facebook, then potentially we would be fooled by the exact same kind of misinformation. Bobby B says, do you like Cory Booker or do you think he's a faker? I like Cory Booker, but that doesn't mean he's perfect. He's definitely done some things in the past that I disagree with and think are not productive. But he's good at messaging. He did a great filibuster. He seems like a nice fella, in my opinion. I think that we need to get rid of this idea that politicians are either perfect or devil. There are better ones and there are worse ones, and even the good ones have flaws and make mistakes. Pappy says, dude, how can you be a Democrat in today's environment? They are violent and Biden was terrible. Pappy, I don't think that what you just said was accurate. There is plenty of data to show that there is way more right-wing violence than left-wing violence. The political leaders on the right are incentivizing and inciting violence and polarization in a way that the political leaders on the left are not doing. And Biden was not a bad president. I am happy to go over more specific things that he's done, but honestly, Pappy, I'm suspicious that you would even hear any of the things that I would tell you. All right, Digital Foods, good to see you again. Firefighters should not be first medical responders. Police should not need to deal with stray dogs and toxic relationships. Defund the police means give some cops money for other specialized jobs. Excellent summation, Digital Foods. You did a way better job than my rambling version. Big John says Trump said himself smart people don't like him. I wonder why. First time Trump told the truth. That is not inaccurate what you're saying. Brandywine says conviction overturned. Now ICE has him and are deporting him. Who are you talking about, Brandywine? Oh, you're talking about this guy Subu Vendum. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Turtle and a Half Shell says I encourage everyone to look at what is being shown to the Republicans. The propaganda is wild. Yeah, I say stay away from right wing propaganda, but just have your mind open to the idea that there is a fire hose of bullshit that they are drowning in, and it is the reason why they vote the way that they vote, and the reason why they say the things that they say. Okay. Jack Jack says, did Biden have an auto copy signature or did I hear a lie? Is there a reason he had one? Every single politician has an auto pen. They have a lot of things they need to sign. It is absolutely a completely made up scandal. Levi Davis says, thoughts on left wing propaganda. For the most part, left wing propaganda doesn't exist. The left wing people in the media, the left wing politicians, they believe that part of their value is just being accurate as humanly possible. And so, I'm sure that there are people out there doing left wing propaganda. I think that there's also a lot of left wing propaganda attacking other people on the left, like encouraging infighting to try to remove any kind of coalition that would stand up against the billionaire class. But by and large, the propaganda problem is coming exclusively from the right. Puppies, Kittens, Sun Fun says left wing propaganda thoughts there isn't enough. I mean, propaganda is not a good thing, regardless of where it comes from. We need accurate information. We need powerful messaging. We need more people doing the work of spreading accurate information. But propaganda itself is a little loosey goosey with the truth. And so we need to avoid that as much as possible. Scott says, do you think Trump personally signed 1,600 pardons for the January 6ers? No, I do not. User a bunch of numbers says, so I just heard you say that Republican lives are less important than Democrats. No, I didn't say that at all, user. Don't know how you misinterpreted or misheard what I just said. Jack Jack says, if the Harris campaign had more time, do you think they would have done better and how? She was limited. I do think she would have done better. I don't know if it would have overcome all of the obstacles that any Democrat would have had in 2024. Pappy says, Democrat Party will never come back to power. Wow, Pappy, I gave you an opportunity to engage in good faith. You spit in my face, so now you're out of here. Scrolling down to the bottom. R1 says, when can the military take down this ad? The military shouldn't be taking down live streamers, if that's what you're getting at. Mike makes deals, says, bruh, so Russiagate wasn't propaganda? No, Russiagate was real. I don't know where this idea came from that Russiagate was any sort of a hoax or whatever, but if you read the Mueller reports, there was a fire where there was that smoke. There's a ton of accuracy in there. I don't know what people are quibbling about. I don't know what people think was inaccurate, but I read it and I was like, hell yeah, there was collusion between Trump and Russia. Russia actively violated the law to try to help him get elected. Like, what do you think was inaccurate about that? Mike's Makes Deal says, they was found inaccurate. Well, I was found your spelling to be terrible. Diego Vargas says, back in 2020, Biden was the only one capable of beating Trump in 24. He was the only one who couldn't. I don't know about that. The Democratic Party was suffering from incumbency bias. They have been at the focus of a billions and billions of dollars of ad spend to try to smear them and incentivize people to not vote or vote for Republicans. So we saw not just Kamala Harris suffer from that incumbency bias and from that propaganda, but Democrats up and down the ballot. Gabe Yaverde says, how do you feel about Kash Patel and how he's been lying under oath to Congress? I think it's disgusting. I think every Republican should lose their job in government because they voted to confirm this. I think every Republican in government should lose their job because they are currently allowing this shit to happen. Full stop. Hawaiian Bear says, I am a veteran and we received a letter blaming the left for the government shutdown. Yeah, that's a violation of what's called the Hatch Act. You are not allowed to use the government's funding or power or infrastructure to push, political agendas and partisanship, shall we say. Jack, is the universe truly infinite? Why do humans have a conscience? Are we alone in space? Let me know. That's a little over my head, Jack, and not really the topic of the conversation. Italiana74 says, do you think we are on a complete democracy change to our constitution and all we stood for in the past? So the Trump administration, the Republican Party, the billionaire class, and adversarial nations like Russia are currently involved in a plot to dismantle American democracy, turn it into authoritarianism, perhaps incite a civil war, perhaps incite more another world war. But they don't. They're not the ones that get to decide that happens. We are the ones that get to decide whether or not that happens. They have a lot of power, they have a lot of influence, they're in a really good position for accomplishing their goal, but we're the ones who have the ultimate say. And so if you and I do the work, then we stop them, then we win. R1 says, when can the military take down this administration? Take down this administration. I do not think that the military, under the command of Pete Hegseth, is going to necessarily stand up to the Trump administration and quote unquote take them down. I think the best that we can hope for is that they just don't follow what are unconstitutional, illegal, or barbaric orders that they're getting from the Trump administration and et al. All right, Digital Food says, what win will get this administration to stop crying? Zero win. I think you know that, Digital Foods. This is part of the Republican Party's strategy, is no matter how much in power they are, no matter how many wins they accumulate, they are still the ones who are being oppressed. They're still the victims of what's going on. We got to cry all these fucking tears for the poor billionaires who have to suffer from the slings and arrows of people using the word billionaire like a pejorative these days. It's the same old fucking bullshit. Also, Digital Foods, do you think there is intelligent extraterrestrial life, and are they leftists? Again, not the topic, not my area of expertise. Read The Three Body Problem. It is an excellent sci-fi series. Tweedledum says, do you have any extra tinfoil hat for my deranged cousin? Tinfoil's cheap. Go to the grocery store. DS James says, do you think Trump is actually overstepping? I think he's just direct about fighting issues. DS James, I don't know if there is a more accurate statement to say than to say that Trump is overstepping. He is breaking the law. He is spitting in the face of the Constitution. He is ignoring our inalienable rights. He is doing things that are wildly inappropriate, illegal, unconstitutional, barbaric, corrupt. Like he has a crypto coin. Like that alone should be the biggest scandal in politics, this century and others. The fact that the Republican Party is letting him get away with that is another reason why every single one of them needs to lose their job. But if you want me to go more into detail on that, DS, I'm happy to. But yeah, he is 100% overstepping without question. Absolutely. DS says, you could say that about most presidents. Obama separated and locked up families at the border. That is extremely different, DS James. There is no president that has redirected funding illegally to ICE and have them build concentration camps. There is no administration that has separated families and then lost those parents. There is no administration that is ignoring people's due process. There is no administration that has had a cryptocurrency. There is no administration that has accepted $400 million jets from the Saudi government. There is no administration that is, there's so many wrong things that Trump is doing that are so much wildly worse than every president in history. It's a little bit like Three Stooges syndrome. Like they all kind of get like stuck in your noodle and have trouble getting out of your mouth, Dude, every administration takes money, not just Trump. No, DS, that is a lie. It is illegal. That is full stop. The Trump administration himself has gotten billions of dollars richer just in this term. That has never happened before. Accepting $400 million gifts from other governments never happened before. Please get your news from somewhere else, DS James, because the things that you are saying are wildly inaccurate, like insanely. And I'm happy to engage with you and like point you in the right direction here. But if you're just going to say no, or if you're just going to say I'm lying or whatever, then that's not what's called a productive conversation, you know? Jarek, Andrew, good to see you again. Mactastic says, when is Trump going to F off? When we make him F off, we have to vote in the people who will hold him accountable. We have to make sure that he does not get a third term. We have to make sure that Congress is no longer in his pocket by replacing Republicans with Democrats. We need to put political pressure on our judges so that they stop giving him all these unnecessary wins. It is up to us to make Trump go away. He is not going to go away himself. DS, all presidents do unspeakable shit. I look at policy. I'm not going to defend any president's character. Yeah, DS, I'm not defending any president's character either. But scale is a thing. The sins of past presidents don't even come close to equaling what Trump is doing. And the fact that you are maintaining that, I'm starting to suspect that you are not even here in good faith. I think that you want to spread this idea that Trump is being a normal president. I think you want to spread this idea that everybody is equally guilty, but it is a flat out fucking lie, my guy. If you want to be, open, if you're open to being convinced, if you're open to a dialogue, I'm down for that. But right now, you just seem like somebody who's trying to fight and trying to spread misinformation. DS James says, what has Trump done that's worse than the Vietnam War and Afghanistan? Well, he gave Afghanistan to the Taliban. He assassinated an Iranian general. He bombed Iran. He's currently starting a war with Venezuela. He has unilaterally executed a bunch of Venezuelan citizens who have not been proven of doing anything wrong. He's literally building concentration camps, fucking 1930s Germany shit. That is all worse. That is worse, my guy. Okay, sorry for tomorrow. Says, hey Jared, long time to see. How have you been? I'm doing good, except I got somebody who is extremely sus in my chat right now. Okay. Digital Food says, don't recommend the three body problem. Talk about we lost before we existed. Very depressing. Did you not like the three body problem? I love the three body problem. Reagan retired to a ranch. Bush Jr. started painting. Neither earned billions while in office after. That is accurate. Andrew says, who did you learn so much about politics? How did you learn so much about politics? When I graduated from college, I was not somebody who was interested or had any kind of like foundational knowledge about politics. I started waiting tables. I waited tables for 12 years. And in the time that I waited tables, I saw what were gross injustices for people in the working class. And even as a waiter, I was suffering from being in a better position than other people's, like busboys and food runners and dishwashers, but not being in a position where I could do anything about it. Where I was like, there's no reason why I should be making more money than these people, but I can't afford to give them my money. Like, what are the systems that need to get changed in order to solve this inequality, not just within the working class, but within the country in general? And so I started like dipping my toes in here and there, and I watched The Daily Show, and I started, reading a little bit of nonfiction about like American history. And when Trump got elected the first time, there was kind of an explosion of podcasts that were going into sort of like political explainers and more in-depth news coverage. And so I just started engaging with that. And I kind of picked it up through osmosis. It's really difficult because there's so much to learn. But when you keep your finger on the pulse for like 15 years or so, you start picking things up. It's a little bit like learning a language. Gross Moore says, I missed the time we didn't have to worry about what our government was doing. Yeah, I think of it like a car that you constantly have to be calling the wheels and telling them not to fall off. 6C Nikki says, thoughts on socialism, communism. So socialism, communism, capitalisms are systems that can work together. And in fact, they currently are. In America, in pretty much every industrialized nation, there is a little bit of communism, a little bit of capitalism, a little bit of socialism. The issue is in the divisions of those sort of like, qualities. I have not seen a country that has done too much socialism or communism so far. There are countries that call themselves socialist or communist, but are actually authoritarian, so not actually. In America, we have too much capitalism. We should have things like socialized medicine. We should have more employee-owned companies. That is, socialism and capitalism and communism all working together. All right. Olive Oil and Zatara says, do you expect some governors to do a soft financial secession where they stop paying the federal government? So I am for all of the various ways that blue states are thinking like novel legal ideas to try to push back against the Trump administration, fight for their citizens, for their constituents. And there is an open question as to how successful those tactics will be, both because of the power discrepancy between the states and the federal government, and also because the judiciary, helmed by the Supreme Court, is extremely, shall we say, they do a lot of work for the Trump administration, shall we say. And so, yeah, whether or not it's going to be effective in the end is an open question. But I think that we should 100% support these blue state governor and blue city mayors in doing everything they can to push back, including this soft secession plan. What's up, Ecuadorian baseball pitcher? Good to see you again as well. Digital Food says three body problem is amazing, but also very depressing. The humanity arises in a universe that is collapsing. Yes, that is accurate. Okay. Denise says, I hope no one is flying right now. Yeah, that is wildly concerning. Juris says, how do you feel about historical democratic policies compared to modern democratic policies? It's a difficult balancing act between people that are trying to do the right thing, but they are living in a time that is not open to the kind of policies that they want to do, and people who are not good at their jobs or people that have malicious intent. I look back at presidents like FDR, and I'm not like history is not my strong suit. I have like a real, B minus history major's understanding of the past. But you look at things that happened during the FDR administration, and you're like, wow, that is great progressive policy that rescued the American economy and brought millions of people out of poverty. And we see watered down versions of things like that in other Democratic administrations. We see a slow decline into authoritarianism from the Republicans, starting with Nixon and the Southern strategy and aligning with the religious right. Um, so I have a lot of I give the Democratic Party a lot of leeway for things they may have done in the past because potentially the politically necessary thing to do was not whatever wildly progressive thing that they wanted to do. Maybe they just maybe their personal belief was in a more centrist policy platform. But yeah, I am encouraged by how much more progressive the Democratic Party has become in the last 2 decades. Right. Grossmore says, I really hope future Republican leaders don't aspire to be wilder than Trump. I hope that also. Doug says, just got banned for saying I am a troll from some guy. Not you, JFK. I'd a real one. Okay, Doug, good to see you again, or for the first time, I guess. If you want to ask a question about politics, then go for it, my guy. Carmine says, thoughts on SS Miller glitching. Yeah, the weird thing about that, so for anybody that doesn't know, Stephen Miller, our shadow president, went on CNN and said that Trump has, I think, plenary authority, which basically means like, I think I'm saying that word correctly, which basically means like total authority over like, where to send the National Guard and stuff like that. And then, but after he said that, after he said plenary authority, he like froze and then did not continue talking in a way that kind of seems like he said something that he shouldn't. And maybe somebody off camera was like, giving him like one of these, or maybe someone in his ear was like, "We told you not to say that yet," or something like that. The thing that I find weird about that though is he and Trump and JD Vance and everybody in their crew, they've all said worse things than that, in my opinion. So I don't know what strategy they think that they were ruining by spilling the beans on that, but that's what it looks like. Yeah. Okay, sorry for tomorrow says we should learn from the past, but the current versions of the parties are what matters. I agree with that. Andrew says, why do you think some MAGA supporters are mad about getting what they voted for? There's a big bowl of different kinds of people in the MAGA movement, and some of them are so deep in the cult and the propaganda and the misinformation that nothing that happens to them or that they see will convince them that this is Trump's fault, that Trump did this to them, that their own vote did this to them. They will always believe that the things that are going wrong in their life are because of somebody that isn't Trump. It'll be Democrats or trans kids or immigrants or poor people or, you know, Jewish space lasers or, whatever. Um, but then there are others that believe that there were things that they voted for, like bringing down costs or not getting into more wars, and they actively are seeing Trump go against that. And so maybe those people are going to be a little bit more open to having the truth shine into their noodles. But I don't know if it's productive to just wait for MAGA to get less MAGA. I think that it is more productive to focus on the you know 80% of the country that isn't MAGA, but that are potentially non-voters or squishy Republican voters or, extreme centrists or things like that. Sorry for Tomorrow says some only see red and therefore only vote red. That's accurate. Ronald Van Det says you are happy and encouraged by the Democrat move towards progressive. I don't know why. Because progressive policy is better, Ronald. And if you like to engage in that, I'm happy to, my guy. But if you're just here to call me an idiot or ill-informed or something, then you can see yourself out. User says, but President Trump stopped 9 wars. No, he didn't. That is a lie. That is a lie that Trump is saying. It is inaccurate. If anything, global instability has increased. Let's see here. Carmine says, my ballot didn't come in the mail. What I got to do? Call your Secretary of State. Dolly says 9 wars. So user is just saying, yes, he did, which again, that is not a question. It is not engaging in good faith, and it is also blatantly untrue. So that's a block. Sorry for Tomorrow says, I think of strengthening of third parties would help in some ways. Potentially, but until we get ranked choice voting, third parties are only ever going to be spoiler candidates. And so we need to work on electing Democrats so we can get ranked choice voting so that third parties can actually get a foot in the door. All right. Zay Miruka says, hello, what's your opinion if China makes USC, United States of China, like USA? I'm not really sure what you mean by that question, Zay Miruka. Yeah, I don't know. Can you clean up your question a little bit? And Digital Foods, my shirt does not say FAP I problems. It say I got 99 problems, but a sweet treat would solve most or all of them, most of them. Okay. Charlie Zan says again, an uninformed Trump voters that just believe anything that comes out of his mouth, that dumpster fire. Diego Vargas says, do you think that promoting trans rights and immigration reform is hurting more than helping the Democratic Party? I do not. I think that the Democratic Party needs to stand by its values and stand tall on its substantive moral foundation. Trying to appeal politically to a group of voters is the wrong way to go. You should be firm in your beliefs, and you should be sincere, because that's the thing that is mostly turning people off the Democratic Party, is that they seem insincere when they are giving interviews and things like that. If you are a centrist, don't pretend to be a progressive to win elections. If you're progressive, don't try to be a centrist to win elections. And if you believe in non-barbaric humanitarian immigration reform and protecting marginalized groups of people like the trans community, then fucking believe that. And don't take your foot off the gas just because you believe that it is, politically inconvenient. You will get fucked by doing that. You will do word salad, and people will smell the insincerity on you, and they will punish you and your Democratic friends at the ballot box. Okay, Turn America Blue says, how do the Democrats get rid of worthless politicians like Schumer, Fetterman, and many others? We have to vote them out of power in the primary. Turn America Blue. The Democratic Party is not some sort of like wildly, effective authoritarian mechanism. It is just what people vote for. Everybody that is currently in power in both the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the federal government are there because citizens voted for them. The reason why we are currently suffering under a Republican authoritarian regime is because people voted for it, and not enough people voted for the alternative. So if people like you and me go out there and do the work of losing primaries for all the people that you just mentioned, Schumer, Fetterman, etc., which, by the way, I am for, then we get a better Democratic Party. But I think it's equally important to recognize that a centrist Democrat like Schumer and Fetterman is still better to have in power than their Republican counterpart, because that's one more vote for the majority. That is one more person caucusing with the Democratic Senate or the Democratic House. Let's see here. But yeah, Mamdani did a really great job in New York, but we got a dude named Cy Cott in San Francisco who is running against Nancy Pelosi, and he's not getting nearly as much heat, even though he's dope as hell as well. Like another great young progressive candidate challenging the centrist Democratic establishment, and he's not getting half as much heat as Mamdani got for some reason. Maybe he doesn't have the same social media savviness to him, but he deserves to unseat Nancy Pelosi. When people hear about him, they change their vote to him. And so I'm trying my best to spread the word about that dude as well. Okay. Zay Miruka says, what if China takes over all Asian countries? China, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Korea, Japan, and every Asia is now the United States of China with one passport. I mean, it's difficult to. That is a really big question, and my expertise is that's not really my expertise, not foreign affairs, particularly not Asian foreign affairs. I obviously don't support any sort of like authoritarian takeover or empire from any powerful nation. I don't think that America should be taking over Panama and Greenland. I don't think that China should be taking over their neighboring countries. If that is something that is going to happen, the Trump administration isn't going to do anything to stand up against that. They are currently giving China the world on a silver platter. And so, what can a responsible administration do? I don't know, man. Coalition of alliances standing up to their authoritarianism and empire building. Yeah, I don't know. The Ukraine model where we just lend our support to the people that are standing up against it. Like, I don't know. Hillary's last email says, do you think Russia has always been an imperialist nation? I mean, I don't know the history of Russia, but I don't know. Genetic Talk says, what is your area of expertise? Domestic politics, I would say, electoral politics. I have some policy expertise, depending, progressive policies. Sorry for Tomorrow says, who better to make decisions on our future than us, than American citizens? Nobody, I guess. Let's see here. You have a great day as well. Digital Food says, are you saying Trump lied when he said nothing bad can happen? It can only good happen. Yeah, I am saying that. I 100% am saying that. Let's see here. David Douglas says, until they throw Mansion Cinema power play and derail Democratic agenda. Yeah, David Douglas. But then you primary those people and you replace them. But we miss having Joe Manchin's vote in the Senate. We miss having Kristen Sinema's vote in the Senate currently. There would not be this pipeline of radical right wing, activist judges being shoveled through the Senate right now if we had two more, centrist, corrupt Democratic votes in Sinema and Manchin. Super Mario says, I disagree with that one person's question that you with makes better decisions. I mean, an argument could be made, Super Mario. Scroll up. It was a two-parter. Oh, gotcha. Be the change. We need the younger generation to be educated to run for office. I completely agree with that. Yes. Jacob Vargas says, will we ever see ICE raids in rural areas as well, or only in strong Democratic strongholds? I mean, I think we are seeing rural areas because like farm workers are not showing up to work because there have been ICE raids on farms in rural areas. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, what ICE is doing is acting like Trump's personal Gestapo. So they are just attacking blue states and blue cities. They are, throwing anybody in jail who they think looks too brown to be a legal American citizen. People are showing them their driver's licenses and birth certificates and saying these are fake. Not even fucking get started on Kilmar Abreu Garcia, David Douglas says, how can we educate the young generation when by design a third of them can't read? It's difficult, David Douglas. The work of the Republican Party to defund publications so that the populace is less educated and more in a position to become radicalized, join the military, be desperate in their, poor working class status. They've been very successful at that. And so the long-term solution is obviously to reinvest in public education. Short term, we just have to do that work. We got to talk to the young people in our lives and make sure that they're talking to their young friends, and Skibidi, Minecraft, Roblox, try to speak their language. Diego Vargas says, do Hispanics like myself need to have our passports at all times to avoid being roughed up by ICE? Diego Vargas, I would say yes, but ICE is ignoring that shit. ICE is ignoring birth certificates and saying that this is fake and doctored. I think your best bet is safety in numbers. It's having a network of people that, you kind of all phone tree and work together to push back against ICE if people are being detained illegally. Make sure that people are in communication with, immigration lawyers, people that are working pro bono, mutual aid societies for funding and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a fucking nightmare out there, guy. Twitter Lodge says, do you think he's doing this to stage a civil war to further stay in office? Yeah, he is. Andrew, where do you, Jarrett, sorry. Andrew says, Jarrett, where do you get most of your political information? So I try to have as varied of a news diet as I can muster. So I use news aggregators like Ground News and the Reddit news feed. I listen to a lot of news podcasts from progressive sources like Crooked Media and MSNBC. But yeah, I try to dip into as many different sources as I can. The only thing that you should avoid media wise is having only one source. And also, you should avoid right wing media because study after study has shown that it is wildly inaccurate. Leo says, "Do you think that ICE will come to Seattle next?" I mean, they go wherever they want. I could not predict where they would need to go next. Lauren, good to see you again. Diego Vargas says, "Did protesters in Portland really burn Ice Cube's tour bus, thinking that it was ice, or is this fake?" I haven't heard that story, so I don't know if it's accurate or not. Digital Food says, speak to the youth in their language. Skibidi, Roblox, Minecraft. It's very funny, Digital Foods. Alrighty. Andrew says, is Joe Rogan a bad source of political information? Yeah, Joe Rogan's a bad source of all information. Political, medical, financial. Like, he does not do any substantive research. He goes on social media, he does a little Googling, and then he spits out whatever he wants from whatever, whoever is sitting in front of him, he will agree with, whether it is somebody that is, speaking accurately, like Bernie Sanders, or somebody who is speaking bullshit, like RFK Jr. So yeah, you should not get any substantive information from comedy podcasters like Joe Rogan or Andrew Schultz or Theo Vaughn. Yeah, it's a fucking bummer, man. It makes me annoyed as a stand-up comedian that these stand-up comedians are doing this to our reputation. Okay, let's see here. Stephen W says ICE sightings have already occurred in Seattle. That's a bummer. David Douglas says youth language today 6'7". Don't ask. I don't get it either. I know what 6'7" is. Let's see here. Steven says I work in downtown Seattle. People have been seen in shackles getting placed in unmarked vehicles. That is fucking disgusting. Teacast says, do you think a dog doing a Nazi salute should be illegal? I mean, I would be extremely sus of anybody teaching their dog how to do that, but I'm not worried about a K-Nazi party. How are we gonna make this work, guys? How are we gonna make K-Nazis? Yeah, there's got to be some good pun in here, some dog shit, some Nazi shit. Shitler, clean up your dog. Shitler's mess. Clean up your dog's shitler. This is how the comedy mind works, guys. Normally I would do this by myself, like on a piece of paper, but you guys are watching the wheels turning here. Okay, Leo says my dad is half Filipino and he looks Hispanic, so I don't know. I mean, that's the whole thing, is they're literally just racially profiling people. All right, guys, we are at an hour, so get in your final questions. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for all the likes, the shares, the gifts, all the supports. K9, that's pretty good. Sorry for tomorrow. Sig Heal, maybe that's something. Sig Heal. Yeah. Fetchism instead of fascism. Yeah, a lot of these are real thin. I like K9. That's good though. But yeah, regular streaming schedule is Monday. Not Shih Tzu. Very good. Techcast. Very good. I like Sig Heal also. I think that's probably the best one that I've come up with. But yeah, not not Shih Tzu and Canine are very good. Andrew says I got to go too, but thanks for answering my questions. You were the best you could, Jared. Thank you, Andrew. You're always welcome here. Super Mario, I got one question. Your opinion: how long do you think the government shutdown will be? I couldn't even begin to to predict that, Super Mario. So sorry about that. So yeah, regular streaming scheduled Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If there are questions that you guys have when I'm not streaming, DMs are open. Email me through my website. Hit me up on my Discord. I want to be a resource for all of you, and so if I can help you get more engaged or educated about politics, I want to be that resource. Use me and use me till I am all used up. Discord is a great resource for recommendations for podcast books and also volunteer opportunities, things that you can do to help fight back against the Trump administration. And lastly, if you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a Patreon you can join for as little as $1 a month. Link is in the bio. You can buy things from my store, and you can also send gifts and be a super subscriber on things like TikTok and YouTube and Twitch and everything. I am unfamiliar with all the various ways that you can send me money over social media, but they exist. If you would like to use them, you can. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea for y'all to do the work. We need to recruit, we need to convince, we need to be helping out these great organizations that need people like Indivisible and Vote Save America. If you live in South Carolina or Texas or Georgia, they are currently recruiting candidates. And even if you don't want to run, they can link you up with people to volunteer for. So be part of the solution, guys. Be the change you want to see. No one is coming to save us. We're the heroes we've been waiting for, etc., etc. Alrighty. Do you blame Nelson Mandela when you wake up and find your name is Berenstain? I will, 100%. He's definitely going to get what for. Okay. Ecuadorian says, I was about to ask the same question because I have my birth certificate, US passport, and state ID. Even though I wasn't born here in the US, am I safe? No brown person is safe, unfortunately. They are actively arresting, detaining, deporting people who are American citizens, veterans, legal residents, people that have no criminal record, people that have only misdemeanors on their criminal records. The number of people that they are deporting who are quote unquote the worst of the worst offenders, like they said, is like, I don't know, like 5% of the people. But people are reporting horror stories by the way that they're being treated by ICE, regardless of if they are, you know, tourists or legal residents or veterans or Native Americans. Like, it's fucking disgusting. Every Republican needs to lose their job over this. It is a massive scandal. It is barbaric. It is unconstitutional. Like, I can't say enough negative things about it. And if you are somebody who presents as a brown person, then I would be worried. I really would. And I would reach out to, mutual aid societies and your neighbors to make sure that you are prepared for if ICE comes after you. I will do anything that I can to help. If I can point you in the right direction. If you need help finding that stuff, like send me a DM or something, because I think it is essential that people who look a certain way, people who speak a certain language, they need to take precautions to protect themselves from the government. And that is a really fucking depressing thing to say. All right, everybody, I'm gonna get out of here. Be good to each other, do the work, be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. And I'll see you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye.